Welcome back to the Explainer, focused learners. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Get ready because we are embarking on a truly fascinating journey. Today, we're unpacking a captivating source text that bridges ancient Eastern philosophy with some, well, incredibly striking modern metaphors. We're going to be traveling all the way from mind-bending ancient Zen riddles right up to a high-stakes modern-day medical survival story. It's honestly a perfect example of how ancient concepts can map directly onto our very modern lives. Let's jump right in.
Okay, consider this ancient riddle. An immortal being walks up to the Buddha and says, "The Buddha has 6 powers, I have 5. What is that missing one?" I want to invite you to try and solve the mystery of this ultimate power with me as we go through this explainer. I mean, think about it. What could possibly be greater than reading minds or literally flying?
Okay, let's dive into this with part 1, searching for that power, the mystery of the final ability.
To really understand this riddle, we have to look at the baseline. According to our source text, this immortal boasted of having 5 highly supernatural abilities. We're talking telepathy, clairvoyance, knowing past lives, and miraculous movement. You know, heavy, magical stuff. But the Buddha supposedly possessed those 5, plus a mysterious 6th power, known as the exhaustion of defilements. The immortal, naturally, wanted to know what this elusive 6th power actually looked like.
And here is where the source text gets just brilliant. The Buddha's profound answer to the immortal wasn't some grand, magical display of light or energy. Instead, the Buddha simply called out the immortal's name. The immortal instinctively replied, "Yes," and the Buddha said, "That one power. You ask me." The power wasn't a magic trick at all. It was that simple, direct interaction. It was the immediate, completely unfiltered reality of the present moment. That immediate awareness, that is the 6th power.
The source text describes this sudden realization using a fantastic phrase, a lock without a keyhole. And this brilliantly illustrates how Zen views enlightenment. You see, we often approach spiritual understanding as this locked door, right? And we spend our entire lives frantically searching for the key. But this metaphor tells us that the gate only appears closed. There's literally no keyhole because no external key is required. True realization isn't something you seek outside yourself, it's something you access instantly, just by being present when your name is called.
Moving right along to part 2, Zen's everyday mind, finding the profound in the ordinary.
You just have to love the terminology here. The ancient masters actually coined a really colorful insult for students who overthought things. They called them a mud-playing fellow. It's a great image, isn't it? Basically, if you try to intellectualize this simple presence, if you try to dissect the Buddha's 6th power with all these academic theories, you're just a kid playing in the mud. The ancient masters were practically begging their students, saying, "Please, don't get stuck in your own intellectual mud. Keep it simple."
They used another great analogy to describe this mistake: misreading the scale's 0 point. So the crucial takeaway here is this. If you treat enlightenment as a tangible, measurable object that you can somehow grasp and weigh, your starting baseline is entirely wrong. And think about it. If your scale's 0 point is off from the very beginning, absolutely everything else you try to measure or understand about the practice will be completely skewed.
To really hammer home how unmagical and grounded this state should be, the text uses the image of 3 old women sitting together. Just look at that concept for a second. It is deeply ordinary, it's totally relatable, and yet it represents the ultimate realization. It's not about shooting lasers from your eyes or hovering above the ground. It is simply about everyday grounded presence. It's that quiet comfort of people just sitting together in the current moment.
Let's move to part 3 and see how this builds. Amitabha's Bluetooth. Ancient grace meets modern technology. What's truly fascinating is how the absolute highest, most complex philosophical concepts of Buddhism, things like no dharma, no awakening, no mind, no consciousness, and no form, how they all just collapse. Now, these are lofty, difficult ideas that could make you a mud-playing fellow for a lifetime. But in Pure Land practice, the source explains that all 5 of these abstract concepts are practically achieved through one profoundly simple action. And that is chanting the Buddha's name, known as Nyanpho.
And the source text uses some incredibly surprising, super modern technological metaphors to explain how this actually works. It literally describes the chanting as an Amitabha Bluetooth connection and a form of cloud salvation. It's kind of wild, right?
But just like you don't need to understand the complex coding of a network to download a file, the text suggests that simply chanting acts as a direct wireless download of spiritual grace. You just pair your device, which is your mind, through chanting and boom, the connection is made.
This brings us to part 4, True Nianfo Miracle, a story of life, death, and reliance.
Let's look at a real-world example from the text. A practitioner named Long Jing starts his journey with intense frustration. He was initially struggling with the seemingly impossible standards of achieving a perfectly pure mind through complex meditation. It gave him immense stress. But he eventually found profound relief when he switched to unconditioned chanting. He completely stopped trying to force his mind to be perfect and just relied on the simple, continuous repetition of the name.
And this simple practice was soon put to the ultimate test. Long Jing outlines a genuinely terrifying timeline in his testimonial. First, he was struck by a sudden, debilitating illness where he couldn't even eat or drink. Second, after a week in the hospital with countless tests, the doctors were completely baffled. They couldn't find a single physical cause. Third, his desperate family turned to a local shrine, which handed down a dire, supernatural death sentence of just 1 to 3 months. Finally, his story concludes with his survival, anchored entirely by a bedside chanting machine. Let's look a little closer at that verdict.
So, according to the testimonial, the local shrine's marshal conducted a spiritual investigation and confirmed this was an untreatable karmic illness, basically a spiritual debt coming due. He gave Long Jing a maximum of 3 months to live. Interestingly, though, the marshal noted that while the hospital itself was incredibly dark spiritually, Long Jing's specific hospital bed was strangely clean and protected.
That protection, Long Jing explains, came from a continuous loop of chanting. Facing immense physical pain, exhaustion, and this literal impending death sentence, there was no way he could maintain complex meditations. He states, "My only effective reliance was the continuous sound of Amitabha from the chanting machine. That simple Bluetooth connection, just letting the machine play the name, became his absolute anchor. And against the shrine's supernatural verdict and the hospital's complete confusion, he made a full recovery well past that 3-month mark."
Which brings us full circle, right back to our ancient riddle, and leaves us with a provocative thought. We started with an immortal looking for a magical sixth power, and we ended with a modern man surviving a medical crisis through the simple sound of a chanting machine. So I ask you, in a world constantly seeking complex solutions, mystical magic, and intellectual overload, is the ultimate power simply a quiet, present mind, tethered to the current moment? Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and I'll see you on the next explainer.